What's up, friends? Brandon here. You're watching the Scale Racing channel. I've had quite a few subscribers asking me about this bracket that I use for my racing. If I would make one and sell it or something like that. It took me a while to build this one. It's rather large. Even if I were to build these things, it would cost a fortune to ship. Plus it would take forever for me to build. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you all the dimensions that you'll possibly need in order to build your own. You don't have to be a master carpenter to build one of these. It's relatively simple. If you've got a table saw, then you're halfway there. If you don't have a table saw, find a friend who has one. See if you can let him borrow it, or maybe for a couple of cold ones, you can get him to cut the pieces for you. There are some tools that you're gonna need, a table saw being one, and I used an air finish nailer for the frame. But other than that, it's pretty much just gluing all these together with wood glue. It takes time, but be patient. It turns out pretty well. So the first thing I'm going to go over is the outer frame dimension. From the outside to the outside of the frame, and from the top to the bottom, measures 46.5 by 35 inches. This is 2.5 inch wide oak. You can use whatever wood you want. I got this at Lowe's. They've got this in the specialty wood department. It doesn't warp, and it usually comes really straight. So basically you're going to have to cut two sides and two tops, and the top piece is going to be 46.5 by 2.5 inches by 3/4 of an inch thick, and the same as the bottom. And the outer sides are 33.5 by 2.5 by 3/4 of an inch. This back plate right here is sanded 1/2 inch plywood, and this is cut to 45 by 33.5. And basically what I did was I just used my finish nailer, and I finish nailed this piece to the sides of the plywood. And I was using glue when I was doing this also. I always tend to use wood glue when I'm doing stuff. It's not flush with the back. There's about 1/4 of an inch gap between the back board and the outside of the back edge of the wood. And the reason why I did that was I wanted this frame right here to be flush with these pieces. I'm going to call these right here car shelves. All these shelves in each one of these sections right here, including my center stack, all of these are cut at 3 3/4 inches by 1 3/4 deep. So this is 1 3/4, this is 3 3/4. And what I used here was lauan. You can get this from Lowe's or Home Depot. It's basically just a 1/4 inch thick plywood. They use it as a back plate on a lot of furniture just to give it structural strength. It's not super thick, but in this application right here, you're not putting a lot of weight on these things. It's plenty strong. It's easy to work with. Each one of these, at least the tops, I had to cut I guess you'd call it a curb inside this to prevent the cars from rolling off of it. And basically what I did here was I just set my table saw at a 1/16 inch deep cut and passed these over that in 3 different passes. Basically just set my fence to a certain width to get this where I wanted it to be, and then I made a subsequent pass on each one of them. If you set it up like an assembly line and you cut all these guys at one width, and then you go through and you make the other passes for the curb, it really goes pretty quickly. So these car shelves, you're going to need 73 of these if you want to do a center stack. If you don't want to do a center stack, then you can delete 13 of them. I'm going to call these a back plate. There are 16 of this size back plate. It measures 2 inch by 1 3/4 inches. You're going to need 8 of these, and this measures 4 inches by 1 3/4 inches. These right here are 8 inches by 1 3/4, and you need 4 of those. And this one right here is 16 by 1 3/4 inches, and you'll need 2 of those. For the center stack, what I did was I custom cut this center stringer connecting my 2 brackets together after all these were glued to the backboard, and then I built off of that. The top sides of the stack are 15 1/4 by 1 3/4 inches. You need 2 of those. And the bottom is 13 inches by 1 3/4 inches, and you'll need 2 of those. And then you just use your car shelves to make your stack with. Of course, if you don't want to make that center stack, you don't have to worry about building all that stuff in the center, but I wanted something that would display my top cars at all times, so that's what I did here. What I did was I made a jig, and basically what it was an 1 5/8 board, and I got some other 2x4s and basically just stacked these vertically. These right here were stacked vertically, and I sandwiched all these pieces between the center board and the 2 outside 2x4s. And then I put a little bit of glue on this top edge, and I just put this piece right on top of that and let it sit. It takes a little bit of time because you have to wait for them to set, but that's what I did. I did it a little bit differently with these guys just because they have the increased width. I glued these cups to the backboard with wood glue. That's all I've got holding it on is wood glue. It's plenty strong. 1 1/4 between the bottom of the frame and the bottom of that cup. The top I've got right at 2 inches. I went about 1 7/8 off the inner frame on each side, and that was my spacing to put the cups in. And I wanted to maintain this 2-inch gap right here because all the rest of them were approximately a little less than 2 inches, but I wanted to have plenty of room right here. So this one was 2 inches from the top, and then it was 2 inches between each one of these subsequent cups until I got all the way down to the bottom. Basically laid this flat on the floor. I measured it all out, got it as square as I possibly could as far as the cup placement, and I glued them down all 3 of the back sides of these cups with wood glue, and I let them set. So once you get all of these initial cups glued in place and they're dry, you can go ahead and take your board. It should be laying flat when you glue all these cups on. What I did is I picked it up, stood it up, and tilted it back, and that's when I started assembling all of the center brackets. I tried to center this piece right here. I made another cup, but this time I didn't use any kind of a jig or anything like that. I just did it freehand. And that's where I actually stood this thing kind of up and at an angle to where there was pressure pushing down on this just by gravity to hold it in place. So I took this, made that cup, glue on all 3 sides, and glued it to this as well. Repeated the same steps with these and the same steps with these. I did this side first, and then when it was dry, then I took this and I put it like that, repeated the same process for the other side. It takes a lot of time, but once you start getting the hang of it, it goes a little bit faster. And when you get this bracket done and you get this bracket done, that's where I'm going to say, okay, take this measurement between the 2 and make your center shelf. You might not get it exactly the same as I did. This was the last piece I cut to tie everything together, and it had to be a certain length in order to fit and make it all flush. Again, everything is held together with wood glue. It takes time, but it works. I haven't had any failures on it yet. It's nice and rigid. It works like it's supposed to. So assembling this thing doesn't take a lot of woodworking prowess. You do need to know how to use a tape measure, and you have to be patient when you wait for that wood glue to dry. It doesn't take long if you use, I use Type Bond 3. It doesn't take very long. You probably put it on there and it's good to go in about 15 minutes. So I worked on it a little bit, put the pieces together, let it sit, let it cure. Then I'd work on the center bracket a little bit, let it cure. Then I'd kind of move in as I went on. So, and that's the main reason why I'm not going to be building these things. If somebody out there with a plastic company like Carney Plastics might be interested in doing something like this, I think that would be cool. But again, the information here, I'll have the dimensions for you to look at. And if you just cut all your pieces to those dimensions and take a little bit of time, you can also have one of these. And I think it's a great visual for a racing channel. It certainly makes things a little bit easier to keep track of as far as, you know, big races where you've got like 32 cars. So if you've got any questions, just leave them in the comments down below. I will do my best to answer anything that you might have. And that's all I have for you tonight. Y'all stay healthy. Have fun racing.